Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. Today, we're lucky enough to get to speak with Eric Lewis, author of the short story anthology As It Seems. And this was just a really, really enticing and exciting story all around because I think for me, I hadn't read your other stories, The Heron King, and I could see pieces of it being pushed in throughout the story. But
Mhm.
without having the greater context, it's still read incredibly easily, or it's still read incredibly well. Sorry, and if anything, it pushed me to want to read the Heron Kings. I think he did an incredible job mixing in stories from both near and far, blending genres, blending themes, and just overall creating a story that, even though it was a collection of short stories, it felt like there was a journey throughout. Like it felt nice reading them in the order that you had them.
Yeah, well, no, thank you very much, first of all. But yeah, I mean, it kind of came about pretty organically. And I think I mentioned the first time we spoke, I didn't know if the books were ever going to get published. I assumed that they weren't. So I was kind of doing this dual track of, okay, I'm assuming I'm never going to get to actually publish my novel. So what can I take from those and maybe, come up with some sort of short stories and maybe get them published in some amateur venue, and that's kind of how I started really. Back in like 2015, early 16, I think was when I first started trying to get some of these published. And there are lots of amateur venues that you can submit stories to. They don't pay anything, or maybe they pay a few dollars, but for a lot of people, that's how you start. So really, it was kind of just from the beginning, okay, what can I take from this book that's probably never going to get published, and how can I sort of repackage it into a short story? So that's really kind of how it all started.
That's a really cool journey to put it together. Because I know you've had a really interesting journey, Eric. As you know, I've followed you for a long time since
I
I think.
appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it's good to finally talk to you. I think I found As It Seems was what put me onto your writing in the first place, and I think it was one of the first threads that I'd ever posted on Twitter saying, "Send me your books, I'll read your books." And I remember the opening story of As It Seems. I've not read it in so long, and I still remember it so vividly. Where the ex slaves or the runaway slaves kind of go on this assassination mission, and the minute I read, I think I'd got to the point where the lead character bursts into this room or runs down an alleyway and finds just the most horrifically violent, gory scene. And the way that it was done, you'll know yourself if you read something and you know from the first couple of paragraphs that you can probably trust the author with where they're going with this. And then the twist at the end of it, I thought, oh, wait, not everything in this book is as it seems. There's going to be a little bit of a twist in every story. And after I'd tore through As It Seems, and after I'd read it, I was like, I got to read this guy's other stuff. But of course, the Heron King, too big for a YPQ box. So when Ryan was asking if we knew of any good anthologies, I went, oh, this is finally my chance to share some Eric Lewis with everyone, which I've been trying to do for a long time anyway. But it's really good to have you on, Matt. It's good to finally meet you.
Oh well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Yeah, that was actually that. It's funny. That was one of the. I think that was the first short story I ever wrote. Like with the app, with the intention of trying to get it published. I was intentionally trying to go, hard, dark, grim, dark. Is I was almost trying to ape Abercrombie. Almost
Oh yeah.
mimicking. I actually submitted it to Grimdark magazine. They rejected it, of course. So it was sort of like what can I get away with sort of thing. And so I wanted to put it at the beginning because it was sort of like, okay, this is what you can expect. So if this isn't your thing, you can stop now. And I wrote a few more that were kind of intentionally sort of like that. Others, they're positively lighthearted, I think. But yeah, I tried to
Yeah.
work at least some sort of twist into every story. I mean, in a sense, that's kind of like how stories work, right? I mean, if something has to be unexpected, otherwise there's no real story. So in a way, the title, As It Seems, is kind of it's a bit of a cheat because that's kind of most stories are like that. But
Yeah, not
yeah,
everything being as it's is such a classic. I think in some of the stories it enhanced my enjoyment of it. Going into it thinking this isn't exact. I'm not being told all the information here yet. There's going to be something that changes things, and kind of looking out for it a bit. I love like the one of my favorite stories. The one that I think stayed with me the most was the brains that fly the spaceships.
Yeah, cold
Can't remember the
calculation.
details exactly, but it has to fly it into the sun at the end because it's way worse than just being dead. And just the little twist being this is a fate worse than death. I was like, yeah, I kind of knew that, but hearing it from the characters is so bleak. It's such a horribly existential kind of story.
Yeah, I kind of stole. I steal a lot of ideas from authors that I have read. So I steal a lot from Frank Herbert. So so I have a couple of stories in there about ancestral memories. This is one where you need a brain to calculate navigation, and it just kind of yeah, it's interesting. That story just kind of crystallized pretty easily in my head. You start with this premise of artificial brains plugged into a machine, and you think, well, that's going to be a horrible fate if it's an actually conscious brain. So that just kind of went from there. Yeah, that story it first appeared in I don't know if it first or it was a reprint in an anthology called Crash Code. And it was, I don't know, it was the first story in the list. It was a list of like 40 stories, and mine was the first one. So I don't know if that means they liked it or if it means they wanted it in the preview. You can read the whole story. Like if you pull it up on Amazon, the preview that you can read the first few pages. Like, well, this is a crap story, so we'll just put it at the beginning so they can read it for free. I don't know. I don't know.
That feels like headlining. That feels like a good thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. Very much feels like
it got nominated for something called a Splatterpunk Award. I don't know what that is, but it didn't win, but it got nominated. So that's interesting. But yeah.
And just kind of adding to all of that, I think going back to the idea of just as it seems, like when I opened the story and I read the first one, I was very much thinking this is going to be much more kind of, I got more of a medieval vibe, maybe occasional Assassin's Creed kind of feeling. But then quickly, I loved how you threw in some sci-fi, how you threw in, I think there was the one story about them, like they work in the mines and they blow up the mines essentially. There was just such a wide range, and it felt like after the first couple of stories, I didn't feel like I knew what I was getting into with the next story, but it all, even though the stories were different, it all kind of seemed vaguely interconnected. They all had this hard hitting moment at the end. They all left you kind of thinking. And I think that's kind of, well, why I really appreciate short stories is that you can't really mince your words. You really just got to go for it and get your point across quickly. And you certainly do.
Well, that's kind of a discipline that comes from just the length requirements of a lot of stories. One tool that I have used in the past is it's called the Submission Grinder. It's a site that kind of aggregates a bunch of venues that buy short stories or I guess novellas too. But you can list by the genre and you can list by the length requirement. So a lot of these stories, if you look at them, they want 2,000, 3,000, maybe 3,500 words, but the numbers of venues that take longer stories, more than 5,000, it falls off pretty quickly. So if you want to submit to a lot of these places, you really have to, you got to keep it short and punchy and sort of learn how to get your story in that really narrow range of word count. And some of them in there are even shorter. They're flash or micro flash fiction under 1,000. Or I have one that was originally 100 words. So how do you tell a story in 100 words? So I've had a couple of those, yeah. But these stories, I wish I could say I planned it all out as kind of a great tome of interconnected works. But really, as I said it, I think in the intro to the book, these are just all the stories that I had the rights to as of the time that I published it. So it's literally just everything that I had I put in there. So if there's a connected theme, it's just because they came from me. But
Yeah, maybe
you know,
maybe more from the style.
yeah, it's
It was the
maybe a
style that
stylistic
connected them
thing.
for me, I think.
But I certainly crib a lot from my some of my novels and some of the ideas and some of the names I see. I think I've mentioned once before. I steal a lot of names from things and then reuse them because I'm not really good at coming up with names. So if I find a good one, I'll tend to reuse it and just hope that no one's read both of them until I put them in my collection, and then oh wait, they are going to read both of them, so I have to change them. So a lot of editing for this was renaming people so they don't get confused.
No, super fair. And I think like it's nice to see how it all comes together and where it all comes from. There is I want to have a little bit of a fangirling moment real quick because I loved the stories where you had the well, how do you even explain it? Like you have the alcohol or the drink that awakens memories.
Mhm.
And that one killed me. I was like, wait, this is fantastic. Like just the whole idea behind it, the concept behind it, like it was so off the beaten path and not like anything I had really considered or read before. So just hats off to you for that. That one definitely stuck with me.
Well, I mean, again, I stole that from Frank Herbert. That's basically.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
ancestral memories. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's the Dune books, the later books. So, but it's funny. I submitted that story for a British Fantasy Society, and they rejected it as exploitative and improbable, as those were their
Oh.
words. So I put that in the book in the below the title. I said this was rejected by BFS for being exploitative and improbable. So we're that as a badge of pride, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be putting that on the blurb.
Yeah.
Yeah, that at that point that's an advertising campaign ready to happen.
I mean, yeah, it's just no such thing as bad publicity, I guess. But yeah, that
Maybe
story and the kind of there's a little bit of a follow up, another story about that. That was, I mean, it's interesting. It's something that's only touched on in I think Children of Dune, where one of the characters is literally possessed by the memory of the evil Baron. So I just wanted to see what I could do with that. Play around with that idea a little bit and maybe change it up into a I don't know, the kind of story that I might write and include in a kind of a very short story in a collection. So yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
And this is something we talked about with with Charlie yesterday. He wrote the other anthology collection that we featured that month, and it was the fact that there's a little bit of context behind where the story was published or where the story came from, a little bit of inspiration, whatever it may be. And I feel like even if it's just a line or two, it adds so much more kind of personalization to the story itself. It helps you kind of have a better idea of like, oh, this was published here. I can go back and I can check that. I can see where else was published there and all this. It really opens kind of the mind to the overarching context of short stories and frankly submissions. Because yeah, I don't think a lot of readers, myself included, really have an idea of how difficult the submissions and I think it's called curing process is. Querying?
curation,
I don't know the word.
querying. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, for short stories, you don't. I mean, it's just you submit the story. Um, that's very that's pretty straightforward. Um, for novels, yeah, the querying process is it's pretty demoralizing. For my very first novel, The Heron King, 242 queries I sent out over a year and a half, and it it ended up with one offer. So and that was back. I mean, I say back in 2016, 17, 18. From what I hear, it's much harder now. Like just to get agents to read anything because you kind of have to already have done their work for them. Basically, you have to have, I mean, you have to be able to do all your own marketing, most of your own editing. They don't want to do anything. And you kind of have a following, a platform, all this stuff. I still don't have any of that. So, yeah, so I made a brief attempt to send out a few queries for my my latest book, Artificer's Nut. It's out now.
Hey,
But I sent out
Yes.
like 80 queries. I got one request after I had already published the book because yeah, I just jumped back into that whole thing for a very short period before realizing I'm not gonna put up with this again. It's just too demoralizing. So I just went ahead and self-published it. I'm still getting rejections for my queries, like 2 months after the book's already been out. So that's how long that they take. They think they can take however long they want. You're just gonna wait and just at their pleasure. So I'm not doing that again. I might try one more time for one more book to try and get it traditionally published, but at this point, there's not a whole lot the publishers can do for you that you can't do for yourself, because
yeah,
they don't do
preach.
any promoting. My second book that came out, it was after the sequel to the Heron Kings. They didn't do any marketing, and it sold like 13 copies worldwide.
I
So it's
remember
like,
seeing this. Yeah,
what am I doing this for? So yeah, the querying process is pretty brutal. For short stories, it's that one thing I like about short stories is you submit, it either gets in or it doesn't. I mean, it can take a long time, but compared to novels, you get very quick feedback. If it gets in, good. If it doesn't, okay, maybe there's something you got to fix. So there's a pretty good quick turnaround on whether you've written a good story. So that's one upside, I think.
Yeah.
I remember seeing this all go down because I'd not long, I think, read The Heron Kings when The Heron Kings Flight, the sequel, came out. Also, The Heron Kings, phenomenal. Not if we had another 40 minutes, I would fangirl over it. I keep recommending it to people if they like peasant uprising, military kind of fantasy fiction. Oh my god, it's
Yeah,
fantastic! What about, especially if you liked As It Seems, because there's a segment in As It Seems that's lifted straight from the Heron Kings, right? When they're at
yeah,
the
yeah.
steam bath.
Like I said, I steal for myself whenever I can. I rewrite it a little bit to make it a short story. I just think it was a nice little self-contained scene that it could make a.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things that I submitted for. It got published on some website. I don't remember what it is, but I didn't get paid or anything. But it was the first thing that was actually, published, if you want to call it that. So that was a very nice little kind of thing for me to to get without having to worry about getting a book published. But yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think it's
So
sorry.
go
I was
on.
just saying, it's really cool to kind of see the behind the scenes because we we haven't featured very many short story anthologies. I believe this would be the third, and obviously the process is so different from what it would be with an actual with a full length novel, and it's really
Mhm.
nice and really interesting to see the behind the scenes of it because I can imagine in all aspects it's incredibly demoralizing. And like you said, I think today as well, they're asking a lot more from authors when it comes from a traditionally published route. So why not just take the leap and do it yourself? But then, when you take the leap and do it yourself, you really don't have that support. So it's got its pros and cons everywhere it goes, but it's cool to see all the different processes and all the different steps there are to it.
Yeah, definitely. And it helps me a bit to take the whole profit motive out of it because I've never made a whole lot of money on these. Like my advance for my first book was $1,000, or minus whatever. I've never made money off the books. I don't care about it. I have a job that pays well enough. I don't need to worry about it. I just want people to read it. So when I like self-publish, I can set it to free if I want.
Mhm.
And have a few people download it. And if I get 100 or 200 downloads, I mean, not everyone who downloads a book for free is going to read it. Most people just like scraping free books just because to have them. I don't know. But if I get that number of people actually reading the book versus half that number who paid for it, and I get paid for it, I'll take the the readers because the money is so tiny. it doesn't really matter to me. So that's one good aspect of self-publishing is that, if that doesn't matter to you, set it to free and get as many readers as possible. So that's kind of my philosophy. I don't know. Maybe it's just more ego versus greed. I don't know.
I think that's so like the whole reason that I started doing the reviews and reading and everything of indie books that led me to meeting Ryan in the first place was because every author that I met and interacted with online didn't care about the money, didn't care about really even the applause of the crowd and stuff. They didn't really want awards and stuff. They just wanted people to read their books, to read their stories, and honestly talk about what they thought about them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, if I can just give someone that, give people that deserve it, people who've written really great books. And it's led us here, which is great. But the whole way along the way that we've done this, I've said time and time again that I think nowadays it's pivoting to where if you're a really great writer, the publishers should be coming to you, try to convince you that you need them. Because I don't think most great writers now, if you've got by any means the ability to like create a following online or gather people to you or even just hit out of somewhere, the publishers can't really offer much nowadays that isn't completely available to a self-published author anyway.
Right, exactly.
Obviously, they've got the advantage of just sheer weight of money, but they're mostly throwing that at celebrity biographies and guaranteed hits and whatever's gone viral on TikTok recently.
Well, that's exactly it. Is that they have no incentive to take a risk. Like there's so many stories that we have featured that there is no chance you would ever see. Like they should be, but they have a tried and true method that they've got their 15 different plot lines, and they're gonna stick to that because at the end of the day, they know that people are gonna walk into a Waterstones or a Barnes and Nobles and just buy whatever book is on that table. They're not gonna go through looking for this and that, and it's a bummer. And I think part of the reason why I got involved with this is that I realized that you've had the same 5 publishing houses in control of, I believe it's 80% of the physical book market since the 1800s. So that's 5 companies essentially dictating human thought. And that's, if our only media comes from Hollywood, that's a terrifying thought. If our only literature comes from Penguin, that's an equally terrifying thought. So it's promoting the little guy and getting the other voices heard, because otherwise they're gonna go away. And like you said, they're just gonna keep pushing celebrity biographies and this and that because they know that they'll make a buck off it.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know what the actual number is, something like 90% of even traditionally published books sell less than 1,000 copies or something like that. So even for the big dogs, only a small number of them are making their actual money. So like, what chance do I have? And they can do these things where they buy copies of their own books to pump up the number and say, "Oh, day one bestseller." Well, it's because you're cheating. So when if opportunities like this, like you've done for me, I very much appreciate just any chance to get my work out there, just to get someone to read it. I'll take that chance, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So,
of course, and we're grateful for you taking part. I hate doing this, but we've got 2 minutes left on the Zoom call, and I want to make sure everybody knows who's read As It Seems. Where can they find you? How can they get a hold of you? What's the best way? What should they read next? Because we'll put all this information in the, I guess, caption or the description below the video. So yeah, give us website, all of it.
Sure. So my other site is called ericlewis.ink, INK. It's a domain used by, I guess, a few writers and a lot of tattoo artists, but the domain was really cheap. So, so on still on Twitter a bit. Name is The Heron King. Just took it from my book. It's called The Heron King. Yeah. Same on Instagram. I'm on there a little bit. That's mostly it these days. The other platforms don't really seem to give a whole lot of engagement. I do have a YouTube channel. It's mostly based on my fandom of Dishonored, the 2012.
Oh, you do the lore videos?
Yeah, I do the lore videos. Yeah. It was supposed to be mostly promoting my books, but it's mostly Dishonored now, but I do have that channel. It's called Eric Lewis Author. I think you search for it. But yeah, I have a page on Amazon, author page. You can link to all my books as well as the magazines that have my short stories. And yeah, any one of those you can find some of my stuff if you're interested. So.
Perfect.
I am so sad that I'm not going to get to ask you about the overlap between your love of Dishonored and your forays into Gaslamp fantasy now, because man,
Oh yeah,
I talk about it for hours.
I
Yeah.
still a couple characters and I rewrite them and put them into here. Oh, just a little bit.
Well, on that note, thank you again, Eric. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's great to actually get to see your face and meet you. For those of you that made it 30 minutes into an interview, the book was As It Seems by Eric Lewis. Take care, and thank you all again.